I knew something was wrong the second I walked into the lobby and felt the silence hit me like a draft. Usually, Monday mornings at CorePath buzzed with caffeine and chaos. Project managers faking importance with their clipboards, interns sprinting with Starbucks trays, analysts whispering about who was sleeping with whom. But that morning, the air was different. Thicker, watchful. And then I saw it. At the security desk, pinned under the cheap plastic cover where they normally kept parking notices, was my face. A full-color printout of my company ID photo. My smile looked forced, my hair flat from the day they'd taken it years ago. But it wasn't the photo that made me freeze. It was the words written in thick black marker across the bottom. Banned from this floor forever. I stopped breathing. The guard wouldn't look at me. He tapped his pen nervously against the desk, pretending to read a logbook. Behind me, the elevator dinged and swallowed a group of junior associates, all pretending they hadn't seen the notice. I swallowed, adjusted my bag on my shoulder, and forced my legs to move. No words, no confrontation, just silence. Because what was I supposed to say? That's me, the woman you've just branded like a criminal. I pushed through the glass doors and kept walking. My heels clicked against the tile, every step sounding louder than it should have. I felt eyes on me from every corner, but no one spoke. Cowards. For 12 years, I had been the one holding CorePath together, not the ones giving TED Talk-style speeches at town halls, not the culture guys who spent more time making vision boards than actual progress. Me, Mandy Lee, integration lead, compliance liaison, the one who made sure we didn't get shut down every time our executives tried to sprint through walls they didn't understand. And this was how they erased me. The humiliation was so sharp I could taste iron. They hadn't just fired me. They'd staged an execution. My face pinned like a wanted poster. Not employee, not person, just a warning. I walked out of the building without a word, the autumn air hitting me cold and raw. My phone buzzed with 2 unread emails from HR, subject lines dripping with finality. Exit protocol reminder and return of company assets. I didn't open them. Instead, I sat in my car, hands shaking, staring at the steering wheel like it might spin me back in time. 1 hour ago, I'd been reviewing the last set of compliance triggers for the CorePath-Vicenda merger, a $500 million deal plastered across every news site. I was the one who held the clearance certificate, the neutral witness authority. My name was on the federal filings, not Tate's, not Mallory's, mine. And now I was banned. I thought of every birthday missed because of late-night server migrations, every holiday dinner interrupted by a frantic call from legal. Every time I sat silently in meetings while men who couldn't even read the integration reports used my work to boost their LinkedIn profiles. For years, I had convinced myself it was worth it. Stability, respect, a career that mattered. But staring at my face taped at that security desk, I realized the truth. I'd been invisible until they needed someone to blame. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me answered. Mandy, a voice said, sharp with panic. It was George, the CFO. His usual drawl was gone. He sounded like a man clinging to a cliff edge. Don't hang up. Listen carefully. The merger, it's gone. Vicenda froze everything. They said compliance is void without you. The board is in meltdown. His breathing was ragged. They're driving to your place right now to beg. Don't answer that door. Do you hear me? Don't answer it. I stared at the windshield, the city lights blurring. My humiliation, my anger, my silence. They weren't just emotions anymore. They were leverage. For the first time in years, I felt something settle inside me. Cold. Steady. They thought they could erase me. Instead, they'd erase the only bridge they had left. And they were about to learn what happens when you cut loose the wrong person. When I got home, the silence hit harder than the lobby humiliation. No Slack notifications, no late-night pings from legal, no endless stream of, "Hey, Mandy." Quick question. That never took less than 3 hours to fix. Just quiet. Too quiet. I set the cardboard box from my office on the kitchen table. My life in corporate exile reduced to a mug that said coffee. Because adulting is hard, a half-used notebook, and a handful of USB drives no one at CorePath knew existed. I stared at them, half numb, half furious. It wasn't grief anymore. It was precision. I had always kept a contingency file. Not because I was paranoid, because I paid attention. 12 years in compliance will teach you one thing. Arrogance always eats itself alive. Executives think regulations are speed bumps. They're not. They're landmines. And I'd been the one walking barefoot through the field for over a decade, clearing the path for them. Now they'd fired me, banned me, humiliated me, and in the process, they'd blown off their own legs. I was still turning that thought over in my mind when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the front door, then again. Harder. I froze. George's voice from an hour earlier echoed in my head. They're driving to your place right now to beg. Don't answer that door. I crept to the hallway, bare feet on cold wood, and glanced at the doorbell cam on my phone. A black sedan sat crooked in the driveway. 2 men in suits stood on the porch, one holding a manila envelope, the other glued to his phone. Their posture screamed panic. They knocked again. This time the sound carried through the walls. "Ms. Lee, we just want to talk," the taller one called, voice too smooth to hide the edge underneath. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just watched them through the grainy screen. Because here's the thing. When you've been invisible your whole career, silence becomes your sharpest weapon. They expected tears, anger, maybe even begging. But silence? Silence unnerved them. After 5 minutes of pacing, one of them muttered something, checked his phone again, and wedged the envelope into the screen door. Then they left, the sedan reversing too fast, tires crunching against the curb. I waited another 10 minutes before opening the door. The envelope lay flat against the porch, damp from the evening air. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I already knew what it said. Apologies. Offers. Empty promises wrapped in corporate jargon. They still thought this was about my job, but they didn't understand. I wasn't playing for a seat at their table anymore. I had built the table. I had wired the locks. I had written the clauses they were now tripping over like blindfolded children. I poured myself a glass of water, sat back down at the kitchen table, and finally pulled the notebook from the box. Its cover was battered, corners bent, but inside my handwriting was neat, meticulous. On page 47, highlighted in angry red ink months ago, was Clause 12B. Termination of the named liaison without formal substitution and recertification voids compliance status and suspends acquisition standing plain English. Fire me without replacing me, and the $500 million merger becomes a legal paperweight. I traced the words with my finger, letting the reality sink in. They hadn't just humiliated me, they'd detonated their own future. My phone buzzed again. A text from Kyle, my old assistant. "Everyone's freaking out. Did you hear something? Legal is blaming finance. Finance is blaming HR. What's Clause 12B? I stared at the message, my lips curving into something between a smile and a grimace. For years, I'd carried the weight of their ignorance, their arrogance, their laziness. Tonight, for the first time, it wasn't my burden anymore. I typed a reply slowly, deliberately. Check the protocol. Page 47, then hit send. No explanation, no hand-holding, just the fuse. I set the phone down and leaned back in my chair. Outside, the sedan was gone, but I knew it wouldn't be the last visit. Desperation has a way of circling back. But tonight, the house was quiet, and I finally felt something I hadn't in years. Control. They thought they'd banned me from their floor forever. What they didn't realize was that I had already taken the ground out from under them, and the fall had only just begun. By Tuesday morning, the cracks were showing. I didn't have to guess. I could hear it through the grapevine. My phone buzzed nonstop, not with calls I intended to answer, but with texts, screenshots, whispers forwarded from people still inside CorePath. The first was from Kyle. Emergency all hands. CFO looks like he hasn't slept. Tate keeps saying it's just a technical glitch. But legal is yelling it's a compliance void. People are whispering about you. I almost laughed. For 12 years, I'd been invisible. Mandy in integration. The one who kept the plumbing from exploding while the executives posed for LinkedIn photos. Now suddenly my name was on everyone's lips. Not out of respect, but fear. The irony was almost poetic. By mid-morning, the news started leaking beyond the walls. A blind item on a finance blog. Unnamed Midwest tech firm faces compliance freeze in $500 million merger. Deal in limbo. They didn't need to name CorePath. Anyone in the industry could connect the dots. The fallout moved fast. At 10:15, Kyle messaged again. Legal just stormed into the boardroom. Someone mentioned Clause 12B out loud. CFO went pale. People are saying you were never replaced. Macrovia froze signatures, Clause 12B, the words I had circled months ago. The landmine I'd left in plain sight, ignored until it blew off their collective legs. Inside the glass tower, panic spread like fire in dry brush. HR blamed legal. Legal blamed finance. Finance blamed the COO. And all of them quietly blamed me. The woman they had erased with a Sharpie scrawl at the security desk. Meanwhile, I sat at my kitchen table in sweatpants, pouring almond milk into my cereal, watching it unfold in real time. At 11:04, George, the CFO, finally called again. I didn't pick up, but his voicemail landed in my inbox seconds later. His voice was high, desperate. Mandy, please, this isn't what it looks like. We just need a quick conversation, off the record. We can fix this. You know how much is riding on this merger. Just call me back. Please, I deleted it without listening twice. Because here's the thing. This wasn't a hiccup. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't even revenge. It was mechanics. You remove the keystone, the arch collapses. Basic physics. And I wasn't about to step back in and hold up their cathedral of arrogance. Not for free. Not ever again. By noon, the panic had legs. Kyle messaged again, faster this time, his typing full of nervous energy. They're saying Macrovia won't accept interim replacements. Everyone's screaming about your name still being on federal filings. Someone dug up your last clearance letter. It's everywhere now. HR says it's a temporary delay, but nobody believes them. Tate looks like he's going to faint. I closed my eyes for a moment, picturing it. The executives who had dismissed me as legacy support now pacing boardroom carpets, sweating through their suits, desperately Googling the very protocols I'd written. And still, they hadn't understood the simplest truth. You don't erase the foundation and expect the house to stand. That afternoon, another voicemail landed, this time from an unknown number. Ms. Lee, this is Andrew Chen from Macrovia Compliance. We've reviewed the documents and noticed your name listed as liaison on all filings. Can you confirm whether you're still authorized under CorePath employment? It's urgent we clarify this. His tone was professional, clipped. But underneath, I heard the tremor of a man who knew $500 million hung on my next sentence. I didn't call back. Not yet. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the fireproof box I'd hidden behind a stack of winter coats. Inside were labeled folders. Legal, protocols, contingency. My handwriting, neat and deliberate, stared back at me. I flipped to the tab I knew by heart. Clause 12B, highlighted again. My signature at the bottom of every page, stamped with dates no one could erase. It wasn't paranoia. It was foresight. I had built the system to protect the company, but I had also built it to protect myself. Because after years of watching arrogance eat through compliance like acid, I knew the day would come when they'd decide I was optional. And when that day came, I'd be ready. By evening, the headlines grew bolder. CorePath Vicenda deal stalled amid compliance dispute. The words hit the finance feeds like a dropped grenade. Stockholders started asking questions. Investors whispered about exit strategies. And inside the tower, I knew the boardroom tremors had become earthquakes. At 7:45, Kyle sent one last text before going silent. People are saying this is all because of you. Some are scared, some are impressed. HR just called you the missing piece. I don't know what to believe, but whatever you did, it's working. I stared at the message for a long time before setting my phone down. Whatever I did, I hadn't done anything. Not yet. All I had done was step back and let the structure collapse under its own weight. And tomorrow, when they realized the bridge was gone for good, the real storm would begin. By Wednesday morning, the silence shattered. It started with an email forwarded by Daniel, my lawyer. Subject line: urgent proposal, immediate engagement. The sender was HR, but the language had Tate's fingerprints all over it. Bloated buzzwords wrapped around a single plea. Come back. They offered double my salary, a new title, enhanced strategic authority, and a return package that read more like a ransom note than a contract. Daniel called me, voice calm as always. Do you want me to ignore it or respond? I thought about it for a long moment. Then I said, respond. But not as me. By noon, he had drafted a reply. Ms. Lee appreciates your revised offer. However, she no longer holds employee status at CorePath Systems. Should your organization wish to re-engage her expertise, Quiet Seal LLC is available for limited licensing of relevant services. Market rates apply. Retainer required. Engagement subject to availability. Surgical. Precise. No emotion. When Daniel read it aloud, I felt something tighten in my chest, then release. For the first time in my career, I wasn't begging for a seat at their table. I was setting the price of admission. And I wasn't cheap. By 3 p.m., my phone lit up with texts from Kyle. The offer leaked. Everyone saw the reply. People are whispering like you're some kind of legend. HR is in meltdown. Someone pasted the message into a staff thread and it's everywhere. I could almost see it. Employees huddled around glowing monitors, reading the response in hushed tones. The same people who never noticed me before suddenly speaking my name like it carried weight. Not Mandy from integration. Not the invisible cog. But Mandy Lee, the woman who stopped a $500 million deal with a single missing signature. I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair, and let the thought settle. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. The knock at my door came just as the sun dipped low behind the trees. Not sharp this time, but hesitant. When I checked the camera, a woman in a slate gray blazer stood on the porch, clutching a leather folio like a life raft. She looked tired, desperate. I didn't open the door. She knocked again, softer. Mandy? It's Allison, from legal. Please, just 5 minutes. We need to talk. I stayed still, watched her shift her weight, glance at her phone, mutter something under her breath. Finally, she slid a white envelope under the door and left, shoulders hunched like she was walking through rain. I picked it up 10 minutes later. Inside was a formal letter of apology, stamped with CorePath's seal. Words like oversight, miscommunication, and unintended outcome filled the page. At the bottom, a handwritten note. Please, Mandy, don't let this end everything. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and set it on the counter. They still thought this was about feelings, about loyalty, about me wanting back into the very place that had erased me. But the truth was simpler. I didn't want back in. I wanted out. And now, for the first time, I had leverage strong enough to make that permanent. That evening, I opened my laptop and filed paperwork for Quiet Seal LLC. 11 minutes later, I had a registered entity, a bank account pending, and a new email domain. Just like that, I wasn't an employee anymore. I was an entity, a vendor, a firewall with terms they couldn't dictate. At 9:30, Kyle texted again. You really did it. People are saying you turned the bridge into a toll road. Tate is furious. He keeps repeating that he'll fix it internally, but nobody believes him. Legal says Macrovia won't budge. I smiled at the phrasing. A toll road. Not burned, not destroyed. Just mine now. At 10:12, George left another voicemail, his voice breaking this time. Mandy, please. I'll authorize anything. Just tell us what you want. We're dead without you. Don't do this to us. I didn't delete it. Not yet. I listened twice, then set the phone down and made myself a grilled cheese sandwich. Because I had already decided. This wasn't something I was doing to them. This was something they had done to themselves. I had simply stopped holding the roof up. By Thursday morning, the headlines were impossible to ignore. CorePath-Visenda merger officially terminated amid compliance void. $500 million deal collapses, stock in freefall. CorePath faces investor revolt after legal oversight. I sat at my kitchen table in sweatpants, sipping warm coffee, watching the fallout unfold in real time. 3 screens lit up in front of me, none connected to Slack, none tethered to the company that had once dictated every waking hour of my life. At 9:04 a.m., my phone buzzed with another voicemail from George, the CFO. His voice was ragged, like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Mandy, this is catastrophic. The board is furious. Investors are pulling out. Visenda won't even return our calls. Please help us fix this. We'll meet any terms you ask. I let it roll into silence. Because what he didn't understand was this. I wasn't holding them hostage. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply stopped carrying the weight of their arrogance. And without me, their tower had crumbled. By midday, a screenshot leaked onto LinkedIn. It showed a photo, my photo, taped to the CorePath security desk with the words, "Banned from this floor forever." Someone had added a caption. "How you treat your veterans tells the rest of us everything we need to know." It spread like wildfire. Former employees chimed in. Clients shared it quietly. Even someone from Visenda's leadership liked the post. The symbolism was too sharp to miss. The woman erased was the same woman who held the entire deal together. Inside CorePath, chaos metastasized. One of Kyle's texts painted the scene. Emergency board session. No bagels, no small talk, just screaming. Tate tried to spin it, said they could rebuild trust. Someone in legal laughed out loud. The lead investor asked, "Who authorized termination without transition?" Everyone stared at their shoes. By evening, Daniel forwarded me one last offer. Triple salary, executive title. An apology letter drafted by PR. It was a desperate Hail Mary, the kind of document that smelled of cold sweat. I didn't even bother to read it all the way through. I just told Daniel to reply with the same message as before. Quiet Seal LLC is available for licensing. Retainer required. Market rates apply. No drama, no emotion, just terms. At 7:13 a.m. Friday, the final blow landed. Visenda released a statement. Due to unresolvable compliance discrepancies and personnel irregularities, Visenda Group has terminated acquisition proceedings with CorePath Systems. We wish all parties well. 4 sentences. Cold. Surgical. By 9 a.m., CorePath stock was in freefall. Investors fled. The CFO resigned mid-call, citing family reasons. HR bled staff in waves. And Tate, the man who had strutted into all hands with startup cult energy, reportedly left the building through a side exit, face pale, suit wrinkled, swagger gone. And me? I didn't go back. Not even when another courier left a velvet box on my porch that afternoon. Inside was a simple note, handwritten on Visenda stationery. Next time, they'll know who built the bridge. RM, CEO, Visenda Group. No pitch, no offer, just recognition. The kind that doesn't come with confetti, but lands like a gavel. I placed it on my bookshelf between the merger binders and Quiet Seal's incorporation papers. Because by then, Quiet Seal LLC wasn't just an idea. It was alive. My inbox pinged with contracts. 2 new clients. One of them was CorePath itself. They didn't want to, but they had no choice. They needed the very infrastructure they had once dismissed as legacy. And now, I controlled the keys. I charged them 4 times the original rate. They didn't complain. They knew better. That evening, as the sun spilled through the blinds, I sat at my new desk, the air smelling of fresh pine instead of burnt coffee. My fingers wrapped around a warm cup, the velvet box catching the light on the shelf. The phone buzzed again. A new email. Subject: respectfully requesting your terms. I smiled, let the coffee sit on my tongue for a moment, then swallowed. They thought they had banned me, erased me, made me a ghost. But in the end, I wasn't chasing anymore. I was the terms. I knew it was coming the second he leaned back in his chair and smirked. If you've got a problem, walk out, my manager scoffed. Like 20 years of service was nothing more than a napkin he could toss after lunch. 20 years. 2 decades of late nights, broken deadlines, last-minute deployments, and Band-Aid fixes I'd been the one to patch. My name wasn't on the website, not on the investor decks, not even in the footnotes of the press releases. But my fingerprints? They were in every line of code, every system that company depended on. And this boy, because that's what he was, a boy with an MBA and a cologne addiction, thought he could dismiss me like I was overhead. He didn't even try to hide the disdain. "You've been here too long, Lisa," he said, flipping my performance folder like it was a diner menu. "We need people who are agile, adaptable. If you can't handle the direction we're going, the door's right there." The door, funny word, isn't it? After 20 years, you'd think it would at least be a farewell, a thank you, a gold watch. Not a door. I didn't rage, didn't argue. I felt something colder than anger, a kind of bone-deep stillness that made me sit straighter in my chair. I thought about all the birthdays I'd missed for this job, the weekends where my daughter's voice was a memory on voicemail because I was stuck in the server room. The time my husband begged me to take one night off to celebrate our anniversary, and I couldn't because the system went down. I sacrificed. And here I was, being told to walk out. So I did. No scene. No tears. I closed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and stood up. The silence in that office was heavy. The kind of silence that drags everything down with it. Respect, loyalty, history. People watched from behind glass conference walls, pretending not to notice. Pretending not to see their future in me. I walked past my team. The same engineers I'd once defended when management wanted to cut corners. Past HR. The same woman who once asked me to mentor her nephew. Nobody said a word. Nobody dared. Silence has gravity. And that day, it was crushing. I didn't go straight home. Not yet. Instead, I found myself at the diner down the street, sliding into a cracked red vinyl booth I'd sat in 100 times before during crunch nights. The waitress didn't ask, just brought me a black coffee. Same as always. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there breathing, the bitterness of the coffee steadying me. Lixora, that company, had been my whole life. I joined when it was barely more than a handful of idealists in a rented office above a pawn shop. We ate takeout off cardboard boxes and dreamed too big for our paychecks. I'd watched it grow into a multi-million-dollar machine. And all of it, the infrastructure, the architecture, the core logic, was built on my foundation. I didn't need to scream into the void that afternoon, because I was the void now. They had no idea what they'd just thrown away. By the time I walked back to my apartment, the sun was dipping behind the skyline, and the city looked like a snow globe of glass towers. I dropped my bag by the door, poured myself a bourbon, and sat at the dining table staring at the manila folder they'd handed me, my so-called termination package. But my attention wasn't on the folder. It was on the drawer beneath it. A drawer I hadn't opened in years. Inside, under tax forms and forgotten coupons, was a slim brown envelope. No label, just weight. And inside that envelope, the provisional patent filings from 2003. My name at the top, not the company's. See, back in the chaos of those early days, I'd taken a mentor's advice, an old patent attorney who told me to keep the provisional rights under my name until things settled. But things at Lexora never settled. They just got bigger, greedier, messier. Nobody ever followed up on that little technicality. Nobody thought it mattered. Until now. Because tucked into that filing was a clause. One tiny paragraph buried in the legalese like a landmine. In the event of involuntary termination without cause, ownership of the patent shall revert to the inventor within 24 hours. Guess what, manager? You just pulled the pin. I leaned back in my chair, the bourbon burning in my throat, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't vengeance. Not yet. It was preparation. That night, I drafted an email to my old mentor, scanned the filing, and asked a single question. Does this still stand? I didn't know it then, but by the time the sun rose, my phone would be buzzing so hard it might crack the nightstand. 183 missed calls. And the founder himself, a man who hadn't spoken to me in 5 years, would be screaming into the receiver, "Why the hell are you registered as the owner of our patents?" And I would smile. Because silence sometimes is strategy. When my mentor finally called me back, I was still in yesterday's clothes. Hoodie, leggings, hair tied back in a knot that had survived 2 nights of restless sleep. The bourbon glass was still on the table, half empty, a ring of amber staining the wood. I answered on the first ring. "Lisa," he said. His voice was gravelly now, older, softer. Retirement in Arizona had aged him into something calmer. I looked at the filing. "You kept the clause. Does it still stand?" I asked. He paused. I could hear the shuffling of papers, the sound of glasses being pushed up the bridge of his nose. "Yes," he said finally. "It's airtight. If they terminated you without cause, ownership reverted to you the moment you walked out." I didn't breathe for a second. "So it's mine?" "It's yours," he confirmed. "Every line of code tied to that patent, every licensing deal, every investor deck, they're squatting on something they no longer own." I sat back, the words pressing down on me like a weight and a release at the same time. Mine. After 2 decades of being background noise, duct tape, the loyal dog, I wasn't just free. I was holding the foundation of their empire. By mid-morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Emails, messages, voicemails stacking one on top of another. The first one I opened was from HR. "Please complete your exit survey within 24 hours. Exit survey. As if I was rating a hotel stay. Then came the texts from coworkers. "So sorry, Lisa. Please stay in touch." Or worse, "Greg said you wanted to leave anyway. Hope you're happy." That one stung, because it told me the lies had already started. But the call that changed everything came a little later. Unknown number. I knew it before I picked up. The founder. "Lisa," he barked. No greeting, no small talk, just raw panic. "Why the hell are you registered as the owner of our patents?" I let the silence sit there for a beat. Then I said evenly, "Because I always was." You just forgot he didn't reply right away. I could hear him pacing, breathing hard. No, that can't be right. Legal never filed the final transfer." I interrupted. "We talked about it after Series A, remember? But it got shuffled, then forgotten. 20 years later, it's still mine." Jesus Christ. He groaned like an animal hit center mass. "Do you understand what this means?" "Oh, I do," I said quietly. He didn't apologize. Didn't ask how I was. His voice cracked only once when he muttered, "The board's gonna kill me." Then he hung up. I set my phone down, stared at the blank wall in front of me, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. control. That afternoon, I opened the drawer again, pulled out the old bank box labeled IP/archive/do not touch. For hours, I sat cross-legged on the floor, sifting through brittle printouts, coffee-stained notebooks, Post-its with my handwriting from 2003. It was like digging through an archaeological site of my own life. At the bottom, I found it. Manila envelope, still sealed with a notary stamp. My provisional filing. My name, my invention. I scanned it, encrypted it, and filed the reversion confirmation through the patent office portal. No drama. No fireworks. Just a quiet checkbox next to involuntary termination without cause and a digital timestamp. Submit. And with that single click, everything shifted. Lexora's flagship system, the core engine that powered their contracts, their demos, their next round of funding, no longer theirs. It was mine. I didn't dance. Didn't cheer. I just leaned back, my cat jumping into my lap like she understood the gravity of what I'd done. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Greg. Of course it was. The boy who told me to walk out. I didn't answer. Let him stew. By the end of the day, the legal team at Lexora would have the reversion notice in their inbox. But here's the thing about companies like that. Legal only checks what executives tell them to check. And executives? They were too busy congratulating themselves in conference rooms, high-fiving each other over strategy decks. Tick, tick, tick. That night, I sat by the window with another bourbon, watching the city glow beneath me. 20 years of service, erased with a smirk. But the thing about foundations is, you can't erase them. You can't fire the architect and expect the house to stand. I wasn't angry anymore. I was still, cold, focused. Because silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy. And my silence had just become their problem. Tomorrow they'd find out, and I'd be waiting. The next morning, I woke to silence. Not peaceful silence. The heavy kind, like the world is holding its breath. My phone lay face down on the nightstand, buzzing in short bursts. When I finally turned it over, the screen was littered with notifications, missed calls, emails, Slack messages from accounts I was no longer part of. I didn't open any of them. Not yet. Instead, I brewed coffee, the kind strong enough to peel paint and watch the steam curl like smoke from a slow fire. The truth was simple. The patent was mine again, but the impact of that truth hadn't hit Lexora yet. That was only a matter of time. Around mid-morning, my curiosity got the better of me. I logged into the public patent database. There it was, plain as day. Owner, Lisa M. Carter. Effective date. Yesterday. My heart gave a steady, deliberate thump. Not excitement, not nerves, just confirmation. By the time I checked my email, one stood out. Forwarded from a friend still inside Lexora. Subject line, possible issue. It had been written by a junior intern in legal, the kind of overeager kid who wears pressed shirts on casual Fridays. He'd been tasked with monitoring competitor filings. Instead, he typed in our own numbers. And there I was. I could almost picture the moment. His mouth going dry, the highlighter freezing mid-swipe. Probably refreshing the page 3 times, praying it was a glitch. But it wasn't. He flagged it to his supervisor. The supervisor flagged it to the general counsel. And from there, panic started to seep through the cracks. By early afternoon, legal had circulated a memo. Another friend forwarded it to me. Half terrified, half amused. The last line said it all. Recommendation, postpone demo until IP ownership clarified. Demo, of course. The next-gen product launch was less than a week away, hyped in press releases, teased in glossy emails. The core engine, the one I wrote in a cramped apartment with ramen wrappers on the floor, was the centerpiece. They'd been bragging for months about how it would redefine adaptive infrastructure. And now, they didn't own it. I could imagine the executives' reaction. Some laughed it off. Clerical error, paperwork mix-up. Others probably insisted it could be ironed out later. But the truth was, there was no later. The clause was ironclad. My mentor had been smart enough to bury it where only a meticulous reader would find it. And now, after 20 years, the tripwire had finally gone off. My phone rang again. Greg, I let it ring. He left a voicemail this time, his voice straining to sound calm. Lisa, let's be reasonable. I think we can work something out. Call me back reasonable. That was rich, coming from the man who'd told me to walk out like I was yesterday's lunch. I didn't delete the voicemail. I saved it. That evening, word started spreading beyond the legal department. Engineers messaged me on LinkedIn, pretending to check in, but their real question was the same. What happened? One even wrote, Greg says you quit. Is that true? Quit? Number, I was shoved out. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Let them stew in their confusion. Let them feel that itch in the back of their skulls, the sense that something was off. As the sun set, I imagined the scene inside Lixora. The interns whispering, the mid-level managers suddenly staying late, the executives too proud to admit they were terrified. The next-gen demo loomed over them like a storm cloud, and they were building a stage on ground that wasn't theirs. And me? I sat in my apartment, bourbon in hand, watching the city lights blink on one by one. 20 years of my life had been given to that company. Loyalty, sacrifice, nights spent at my desk instead of home with my family. They'd tossed me aside without a second thought. But now, for the first time in 2 decades, I wasn't powerless. I wasn't the background character, the loyal employee, the duct tape holding their fragile empire together. I was the architect. And they had just fired the architect without checking who owned the blueprints. Before I went to bed, I checked the patent site one more time. My name gleamed back at me. Black and white, undeniable. The foundation was mine. The house was theirs. And the cracks were spreading. Tomorrow they'd break. 3 days later, Lixora's big demo day arrived. I wasn't in the building, of course. I didn't need to be. But I knew exactly how it looked. Sleek banners, polished concrete floors, a 30-foot LED screen glowing with the words, "Next is now." Rows of investors, government liaisons, venture partners, all the people whose signatures and checkbooks kept the machine running. And backstage? Greg, my replacement, my executioner. Probably pacing with a mic clipped to his tie, rehearsing lines he barely understood. He'd been waiting for this moment, the chance to prove himself as the face of innovation. Only problem? He was about to pitch a product built on code that didn't legally belong to him. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard everything. Friends still inside kept me updated in real time. Messages trickled in like play-by-play commentary. Stage looks packed. Greg is all smiles. Investors just walked in. Then came the one that made me sit up straight. Legal just walked on stage. Apparently, Greg had only just started his speech. He'd launched into some syrupy line about redefining infrastructure when a tall woman from legal stepped out of the wings. She leaned in, whispered something directly into his ear. And whatever she said drained the blood from his face. The mic was still on. Everyone in the first few rows heard it. We can't demo that system. We don't own the patent anymore, silence. Thick, jagged silence. The kind that doesn't just hang in the air, it cuts through it. Greg laughed too loud, trying to play it off. Small technical hiccup, he told the crowd. Just give us a moment. He stepped aside with legal, his mic picking up the hiss of panic in his voice. What are you talking about? We've always owned that code. The reply was calm, cold, undeniable. No, we never did. Lisa Carter owns it. The reversion is live phones lit up in the audience. Investors pulled up the patent database right there on their laps. And within seconds, my name was everywhere. Projected onto phone screens, whispered in corners, printed across impromptu handouts that had been forwarded to the entire room. I wasn't in the auditorium, but my presence filled it. One investor, a woman from Draper Partners, stood up mid-row, holding a sheet of paper above her head. "I believe this is the current patent registration," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It lists Lisa Carter as the owner." That was the moment the demo collapsed. Greg stammered, reaching for excuses. "This is a misunderstanding. We're in the process of—" But no one was listening. Eyes weren't on him anymore. They were scanning the documents, sharing whispers, piecing it together. The product, the very system Lexora had been promising for months, was built on intellectual property they no longer owned. In the back of the room, the founder himself, Hal, stood with arms crossed. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. Witnesses said his face was unreadable, but his silence was louder than any shouting could have been. Meanwhile, legal stood at Greg's side, motionless, refusing to back him up. They knew the truth, and they weren't about to let their signatures end careers. The LED screen froze on a blank placeholder. The audience murmured. No one applauded. The silence grew heavier, more suffocating by the second. And me? I was at home on my porch, bourbon in hand, my cat curled at my feet. My phone buzzed with updates. Demo canceled. Board meeting called immediately. Greg looks like he's about to collapse. I didn't smile. Not yet. I just sat there, watching the sunset burn red over the skyline, thinking about all the nights I'd sacrificed for a company that erased me with a smirk. They hadn't fired an employee. They'd evicted the architect. And now the foundation was gone. That evening, more calls came through. Greg, 3 times. Legal, twice. Even Marcy from Products sent a sad face emoji, followed by, "Hey, are you okay?" I didn't answer. Not a single one. Because silence had become my greatest weapon. And tomorrow, it wouldn't just be a failed demo haunting them. Tomorrow, the board would finally understand what Greg had done. And the reckoning would begin. The morning after the demo collapsed, I woke to a phone that wouldn't stop shaking on my nightstand. When I turned it over, the lock screen didn't even show names anymore. Just numbers. 200 missed calls. Voicemails stacked so high the counter stopped keeping track. I didn't listen. Not at first. I poured myself coffee, stretched out on the couch, my cat pressing against my legs like she knew something cosmic had shifted. The city outside was quiet, but I knew inside Lexora's walls, it was chaos. Finally, one name caught my eye. Hal, the founder. I called him back. He picked up on the first ring. No greeting, no pleasantries. Just a voice like sandpaper and thunder. "Lisa, what do you want?" Not "can we fix this?" Not "I'm sorry." Not even "let's negotiate." He already knew those questions didn't matter anymore. I didn't answer him on the phone. Instead, 10 minutes later, I sent an email. Subject line: terms. The body was short, sharp, surgical. No legal jargon, no filler. Full buyout rights for Lexora Systems to Relicant's patent number 79864322. An 8-figure royalty agreement, retroactive to the date of termination. A seat on the board with voting privileges. Non-negotiable. I ended it with a single sentence. This is not revenge. This is realignment. I hit send. No signature, no warmth, just truth. For hours, there was silence. The kind that settles into your bones, heavy and certain. I pictured them in that glass boardroom, papers spread across the table, investors demanding answers, lawyers whispering worst-case scenarios. And then came the reply. 4 words. We accept. All terms. I didn't answer right away. I let them sweat. Let them think I might change my mind. Only after a full hour did I send my response. I'll need a fresh badge. And my nameplate returned. You'll find it in Greg's desk drawer. Second one down. He never threw it away. Just hid it. That detail wasn't for leverage. It was for me. Proof that even the man who told me to walk out hadn't truly erased me. He couldn't. By evening, the paperwork was already moving. licensing agents drafting contracts, HR scrambling to rewrite policies, lawyers combing every old filing for overlooked clauses. My inbox filled with carefully worded apologies disguised as compliance notices. I didn't feel triumph, exactly. More like vindication. After 20 years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of being the silent backbone of their empire, I was finally recognized. Not with applause, not with a plaque, but with respect, equity, and leverage they could never take away again. That night, I sat by the window, bourbon in hand, watching the skyline flicker. My cat purred against my side. The silence that had crushed me days before was still there, but now it belonged to me. The next day, news of the board's decision leaked. Industry blogs lit up. Lexora Systems restructures after failed demo. Patent reverts to longtime engineer. Founder forced to concede control. My name wasn't in the headlines yet, but it was in the contracts, in the legal filings, in every late-night meeting they were scrambling to hold. And Greg? Word was, he cleaned out his desk quietly. No farewell speech, no smirk. Just a man whose arrogance finally caught up with him. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a victory speech online. That wasn't the point. This wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was mine and proving a truth too many people forget. You cannot erase the architect and expect the house to stand. By the end of the week, my new badge arrived in the mail. Plain plastic, my name etched across the front. I held it in my hand for a long time, feeling the weight of it. Not a symbol of belonging anymore, but of ownership. I clipped it to my shirt, sat back down at my desk, and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page, I wrote a sentence in bold letters. Some of us don't burn bridges. We build new cities, and we charge rent. Then I closed the notebook and smiled. Because silence, used wisely, is louder than any applause. And this time, the silence was mine.